Just 11 months ago, Ryan Grubb was the prized addition to Mike Macdonald's first coaching staff. Now he's got an unemployment paper. What happened to lead to Ryan Grubb being one and done? We're going to be breaking it all down here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on our latest Monday installment by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there, whether you're listening in North Bend, Washington, or over in Newcastle, England. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you. Breaking Locked On Seahawks, your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks making their first major move of the offseason, literally less than 24 hours after beating the Rams in their season finale. Ryan Grubb is out as offensive coordinator. We're going to take a look at what went down to lead to such a quick exit for Ryan Grubb as the play caller. We've got our latest mailbag and, of course, Monday Musings. Last time for the year, we're going to dive into some takeaways from yesterday's season-ending win over the Rams. This episode is brought your way by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find a qualified candidate you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedInNFL. Terms and conditions apply. We can't say that it's necessarily a surprise because those of you that listen to the show 5 days a week, again, we greatly appreciate each and every one of you. The topic of Ryan Grubb's status for beyond 2024, it has been up for debate for really the last couple of months. In his first season, there have been enough questions with this offense, a lack of progress in some areas, a regression. And so it isn't necessarily a surprise the news broke on Monday morning that Mike Macdonald and company had decided to part ways with Ryan Grubb just 11 months after he was spotted in Dino's Pub with John Schneider and Macdonald. They were drinking some beers and getting ready for the upcoming season. They were reeling in their new coordinator. Less than a year later, he is no longer on the staff. And this is going to create some interesting conversations because this was a first-time NFL offensive coordinator, and there's many out there that'll argue that Ryan Grubb deserved a chance for a second season. But clearly Mike Macdonald's frustrations with the lack of a run game, some of the issues the Seahawks had at the end of games in terms of clock management and how the play calling impacts that, those things over time became too much for Mike Macdonald to deal with. And you had an ideology issue with these two guys that they just were they were not mirror images. They were opposites of each other, and it just didn't work. Nothing against one another. I've got an article I just posted on Seahawks on SI breaking this down, but this was not anything personal. It just didn't work. Two guys with different philosophies on offense, and ultimately it ended up blowing up in Ryan Grubb's face in the sense that he couldn't make the adjustments that he needed to be able to come back for a second season.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to, Corbin, is it just didn't work well enough. I think you can make an argument that it worked pretty darn well. I mean, obviously, Geno Smith putting up the numbers that he did, JSN matching Tyler Lockett's record for the most receptions in franchise history. The fact that the Seahawks finished the season on a 2-game winning streak, 10-7, 4-2 in the division. And I think a big part of that success was due to the play calling, due to Ryan Grubb's coaching, due to the Seahawks' success on offense. But when you are 10-7, when you are the best team that does not qualify for the playoffs, then I think that it is easy to start looking for the reasons why the Seahawks are not going to be involved in the postseason. And when you consider the fact that Seattle has the talent that they have at the quarterback, receiver, and running back position specifically, that skill position talent, then I think that it is easy to cast the blame on Ryan Grubb as the play caller and basically say if Seattle had just been a little bit better in this game or in that game, then they would be, hosting a playoff game here this upcoming weekend. So, as you said, Corbin, I mean, I don't think that this is a situation where that you have Mike Macdonald and Ryan Grubb are just at each other's throats and they hate each other. I don't think that there is any reason to suspect that that is the case, but I do think that there was very much a clash in philosophies. It felt like Ryan Grubb was trying to outscore everybody rather than playing the complementary type of approach that I think that Mike Macdonald was looking to do. There were just too many times where Seattle was throwing the ball rather than running the ball, eating up clock and preserving the defense, taking advantage of the special team superstardom that was Jason Myers at the kicker position. So again, to me, that's really what this comes down to, is that the Mike Macdonald, obviously as head coach, he is going to have his final decision here. I applaud him for being quick with his decisions and moving forward, because I do think that this is a club that frankly did underachieve considering all of their talent. But at the same time, I also think that Ryan Grubb did a pretty solid job, considering that this was a massive transition from college football to the NFL. It just wasn't quite good enough, and that's why the Seahawks are back to the drawing board when it comes to the offensive coordinator.
There are a number of stats that you can look at that point to why Mike Macdonald had to make this move. As one of the sources I talked to recently said, this just reached a point where it wasn't tenable in terms of their philosophical differences, and the product on the field was simply not good enough. The Seahawks finished 19th in scoring per game with all the talent they have. And I know Ken Walker III missed a handful of games. DK Metcalf missed 2 games, but this was generally a pretty healthy group at the skill positions compared to a lot of the other teams out there. For them to finish 19th and just score 22.1 points per game, that was not acceptable. And it actually got worse as the season progressed. This is a team that had a lot of games where the offense just kind of went AWOL for large chunks of the game, and you didn't have that complementary football that you need. They were 28th in rushing. That was obviously the biggest issue here. Late in games, the 2 games that really stood out were the Packers and Vikings losses. And from everything that I've been told, those were kind of the losses that broke the camel's back, so to speak, because you had 2 instances where the run game could have been utilized either to try to squeeze a deficit even further against Green Bay or against Minnesota. You could have beat the Vikings when they got down to the 37-yard line, eat some clock, and make the Vikings have to think about using some of their timeouts. And that over-aggressiveness, just slinging the ball over the place, there's times for it. But the problem was it was too stubborn of an approach by Ryan Grubb. Let's be honest. That was the biggest issue here. And that is really ultimately what led to the biggest issue. To me, this is the biggest reason Ryan Grubb doesn't have a job today. The Seahawks were 28th in goal to go offense. And that isn't just on Geno Smith. Obviously, he made some mistakes, threw some interceptions, but they were one of the worst teams rushing the ball down there. And there were too many times they didn't even try to run the ball in those situations. And that, to me, completely went against the Baltimore Ravens ideology that Mike Macdonald comes from. Like, we want to be physical. We want to smash people. And it makes you wonder about why this move was made to begin with back in February. But I think a big part of it was that Pete Carroll and John Schneider both had their eyes on Ryan Grubb while he was lighting things up in Washington. They were intrigued by him. And the fact that Macdonald was hired so late in the process, the Seahawks had less options for offensive coordinator. So this turned out to be the best option in their opinion. And again, it just ultimately does not work out. And I think Ryan Grubb will land on his feet. I think he's probably going to go back to the college level and he's going to be able to thrive again. But this just was a situation that ultimately was not going to work because the personnel is part of it, but also just the ideology, the philosophical things on offense. It is really difficult when you're a head coach and you want to do things one way, and then you're an offensive coordinator and you want to do things another way. These guys were both kind of hitting their heads against the wall, trying to do things the way they wanted to do it. And that is not something that is healthy for a coaching staff.
Oh, no question about it. And I would agree with what you said before about with, John Schneider and Pete Carroll probably had their eyes on Ryan Grubb because obviously the success that they had at Montlake, speaks for itself. He and Kalen DeBoer, and that's frankly where I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's where Ryan Grubb lands. Is in Tuscaloosa with Kalen DeBoer, and in Alabama winds up back in the college football playoff a year from now, and Ryan Grubb basically has all the shine is back on him, so to speak, when it comes to the next hiring cycle, whether it be in the NFL or in college football. But as you said, Corbin, I very much expect Ryan Grubb to land on his feet. But it was just the inability to run the ball with any type of consistency. And that to me is one of the single biggest reason why the Seahawks, again, are going to be making a switch at the offensive coordinator position. The other thing that you said there that I think is so logical. It makes so much sense that anybody who disputes it is just not dealing in reality. It's just the fact that when the Seahawks made that decision, they were having those beers at Dino's with Ryan Grubb. Then it was very late in the process. Essentially, it is trying to go Christmas shopping the day before on December 23rd or something. You're just not going to have as many options, as much time to get that excellent gift. And I think that the Seahawks, by allowing Ryan Grubb to leave now, then obviously on so-called Black Monday, when NFL coaches all across the league are getting fired, that gives Ryan Grubb the opportunity to pursue elsewhere. But more importantly for the Seahawks, it's going to give them the opportunity to look at cast a wide net, something that Mike Macdonald talked about doing, but frankly just didn't have the opportunity to do so, because the Seahawks cast such a wide net as far as the head coaching search a year ago. I think the Seahawks made the best of the situation they were in a year ago. They basically swung for the fences, to kind of mix my sports analogies here, swung for the fences with Ryan Grubb. It didn't work after 1 year. Hell, it didn't work with the Seahawks when Mike Holmgren was head coach, when Pete Carroll was head coach, when Dennis Erickson was head coach. Each of their initial hires, that offensive coordinator, wound up only lasting that one season. So Mike Macdonald is just doing the exact same thing. What's critical now, however, is that Mike Macdonald is not going to be allowed multiple offensive coordinators before the heat starts getting on him a little bit. And
he's got to nail this one.
Exactly. And that's what's most important here, is that you got that little stub your toe mistake here the first time around. Now that you have the entire gamut of the league to evaluate, this offensive coordinator selection they make here is absolutely critical.
And it's also on John Schneider. There will be a lot of heat on his seat. There might already be some heat on his seat because he was heavily involved in that recruitment to get Ryan Grubb to come from Alabama, where he'd been like 6 minutes, and then come out to Seattle. So again, I've got an article that I just posted, tons of details about how this all went down. Really have been following this closely. If you've been listening to our show, this shouldn't surprise you, but I've been monitoring this really since before the bye week, when there were already some discussions about this possibility happening. Make sure to check that out on Seahawks on SI. When we come back, we've got Monday mailbag questions, tons of them from you, our valued listeners. We'll get to those coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That has definitely happened for me. I actually had 10 subscriptions I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down and get rid of them. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together into one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year. For me, one of the best features is absolutely the subscription tracker. I've used it multiple times to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton of money. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. This episode's also brought your way by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're tasked with hiring your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They offer a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. In fact, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours, and LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding new ways to make the process easier, including recently launching a feature that helps you write job descriptions. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonNFL. That's linkedin.com/lockedonNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s. As always, thanks for tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. let's get to our mailbag questions. And I'm sure that we're going to have a lot of questions about a certain vacancy that is now open, but we'll get to those as we roll here, Rob. Our first one coming from Mike C. from NJ. It's going to be a busy offseason. Do you think there could be a few surprise trades this offseason, mainly involving either DK or K9?
Well, I do think that there's a possibility that DK Metcalf could be traded. I'd be surprised by Kenneth Walker III at this point, just because of the fact that he does not have the and I apologize for the background noise here, but because Kenneth Walker III, of course, is had a couple of different seasons here in which he has struggled with durability, whereas DK Metcalf has been quite durable throughout his career. Also, as we've talked about a couple of different times, Corbin, this is a spectacular running back class that the NFL teams are going to be able to take advantage of in 2025. That said, it is not nearly as talented at wide receiver. DK Metcalf is the most physically gifted, tradable commodity that the Seahawks have at this point. I am not arguing for the Seahawks to trade DK Metcalf, but if they are going to make a splashy move, I do believe it's number 14 is the most likely to fetch the ransom that the Seahawks need to put themselves back into playoff contention.
Our next question here from Josh the Human. Would Trey Smith or Liam Eichenberg be a better free agent guard signing for the Hawks? Look, I've watched both these guys play. I was a big fan of Trey Smith coming into the draft 4 years ago. Now, he was a player that had some medical red flags coming out of Tennessee, and he dropped deep into day 3. I don't know if the Seahawks had him on their list as a player that was undraftable. Every team's got those medical flags where there's guys didn't pass the physical. I don't think I'm going to draft this guy worried about physical condition. And all he's done has been a really solid, a rock solid starting guard for the Kansas City Chiefs since coming into the league. Eichenberg, I have questions about his fit at guard. He's kind of one of those tweeners where he's built more like a tackle, but he's got some lumbering footwork that fits better in the guard position, and he's had some issues over the course of his NFL career. There's been some good moments. He's been very inconsistent, though. Trey Smith, to me, would be the one that would make the most sense, and the fact that he's been generally pretty darn healthy for Kansas City since they drafted him. Even a team like the Seahawks, if they did have red flags, you can say, well, the guy's played the last 4 years, and if he passes the physical in the free agent process, that is a guy that I would absolutely consider spending some significant money to try to bolster the interior of this offensive line. Our next question from Why Seahawks Fan 4, hypothetical, if you had to choose between extending Geno or extending DK, who would you choose and why? And we get this question, reworded different ways. We've gotten it a few times over the course of the season, but it always feels like every different stage maybe has a different answer behind it.
Well, and I don't know that you have to do one or the other or neither. I think that you can do both. I really do believe that is a duo of players that their talent speaks for itself. Just similarly to what I talked about just a moment ago, and how this is a draft class that is lacking in receiver talent. It's definitely lacking at quarterback talent as well. Now, I think that if you are going to be extending Geno Smith, I think you have to be careful here, just because the fact that he is raising in age, of course, and then or advancing in age. And look, for all the people who want to just kind of throw dirt on Ryan Grubb, I think that the fact that he called as many passes as he did, I think there's a reason why Geno Smith was as complimentary as he was about Ryan Grubb. While Geno Smith certainly absorbed some big hits, his statistics were inflated because of Ryan Grubb's pass-happy offense as well. So I say all that because, again, look, I'm a fan of Geno Smith. I don't think that there's any realistic candidate out there that is going to be upgrade over Geno Smith, and I love the idea of rewarding him for his leadership, for his durability, just for the precision passing that he is. And as I mentioned a moment ago with DK Metcalf and just his talent, his ability, the fact that he's a homegrown product, so to speak, all those are reasons why I think that you should be extending him. Which one do you extend first? I extend the quarterback first, just because he is the quarterback. I think they're both key players of this team. And if you are going to consider the idea of moving past them, then you better have a suitable replacement, because the Seahawks clearly a backup quarterback, and at the other receivers on this roster, other than JSN, the Seahawks don't appear to have any type of playmaking answers for the long term.
Next question here coming from Jason Y22. Looking ahead towards the draft season with how good of a tight end class is coming this coming spring. Is it crazy to think Seattle would opt to go for an elite tight end like Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland at 18th overall versus going interior offensive line? This is not going to be the answer a lot of 12s want to hear. I think you've got to go offensive line there, but I absolutely can see this happening because I don't know that Noah Fant is back next year. Now, he had a really good game to close out the season, and maybe you get a new offensive coordinator that says, look, I'm going to be able to maximize that guy. But wasn't Ryan Grubb supposed to be doing that? And it didn't play out this year. You've got A.J. Barner, who looks like he's going to be a really good player in the NFL, already had 4 touchdowns this year. You've got to have that other tight end, though. It's not going to be Pharaoh Brown. We don't know if it's going to be Noah Fant. And look, Warren is a phenomenal player. If you watch the Penn State-Boise State game, some of the plays he made were just flat out ridiculous. He's not Brock Bowers, but he is a first-round caliber tight end. If you can get somebody like that at 18, and that's the best player available, then I can absolutely see John Schneider going that route, especially if he's not overly impressed with the offensive linemen that are available there. And we know how he feels about drafting guards in the first round. Next question from Elo Tato tweets, do you think Olu Oluwatimi can be the guy that finally ends the Max Unger curse, or do you think we still need to upgrade? That's a really good question at this point.
Well, if you mean by the could be the Max Unger replacement, basically, can be the next Seahawks center to actually qualify for the Pro Bowl, no. I don't think Oluwatimi is that good. I think he's a solid player. I think he's a solid starter in the NFL, can be a long-time starter in the NFL. His durability, just his size, his mentality, everything that I saw at the college level and here where he actually got his first real opportunity to run with the ones suggests that he can be a quality starter in the NFL. I just don't see the elite athletic ability from him to be able to create the kind of dominating blocks that are going to get that type of attention. So I guess my argument would be that I do think that he can be Seattle's starter long term. I don't believe that he is a guy that you have to worry about as far as becoming one of the top 5 paid centers in all of the NFL, which the perennial Pro Bowlers, all pros, of course, wind up becoming.
And our last question here coming from Salvo Trucco. After hearing about the Grubb firing, does Mike Macdonald go in-house with Jake Peetz as the new offensive coordinator to keep some continuity with the current roster? We'll talk more in tomorrow's show about candidates to potentially replace Ryan Grubb. I think that you've got to have Jake Peetz on there because unlike Ryan Grubb, he actually had been an offensive coordinator at the NFL level previously. So there's some experience there. He worked with Sean McVay in LA the last couple of seasons. There's going to be a run game background with him when you look at the stops he had at the college level. He's coached at some places where they definitely ran the football, and he's a player that or coach the players really love, really energized. He's one of those guys when you watch, like, is he one of the players? Because he actually goes out there and like covers guys, and it's really fun to watch. But I think he is going to be in the mix there. At the same time, Mike Macdonald made it very clear today that they are going to be immediately looking for options outside of the building. They want to get the best play caller they can. If Peetz ends up being that guy, it's possible he'll be in consideration. But as we'll talk tomorrow, there's some other really good names that should be at least on the table for the Seahawks to consider. When we come back, we've got one last Monday musing for the season. We're going to take one last look at yesterday's season finale win over the Rams. What stood out on offense and defense? We'll get to that coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready for the NFL playoffs with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can bet on everything from Bo Nix scoring 3 total touchdowns next weekend in the postseason, or Lamar Jackson being the first skill player to have a passing and rushing touchdown. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel this playoff season, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be teaming up with my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s listening in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Let's get to our final Monday musings of the 2024 season. The Seahawks wrapping things up with a 30-25 road win over the Rams. Yes, the Rams were playing a lot of backups, particularly on the offensive side of the football, but a win is a win. The Seahawks get to double-digit victories for the first time since 2020. Mike Macdonald, the first head coach in Seahawks history to get 10 wins or more in his first season. There's plenty to be excited about moving forward. Obviously, they're already making some changes to try to take that next step. Rob, looking at yesterday's game, you have to have kind of a unfogged lens, so to speak, when you're looking at a game like this, because it's tough when one team has a lot to play for and the other one has literally nothing to play for. In this case, neither team really had anything to play for in this game. At the same time, clearly the Seahawks wanted to win this football game. They still played hard for Mike Macdonald in all phases. What stood out to you as far as a Monday musing takeaway on the offensive side of the football?
Well, one of the things we kind of talked about a little bit earlier, that one of the priorities for the Seahawks in this past offseason was they said that they wanted to get their tight ends more involved. And I thought that this was a game that illustrated just how critical and how effective the tight end could be in what was Ryan Grubb's offense. But let's just focus in on and call it Geno Smith's offense at this point. I love the fact that A.J. Barr, to me, has become one of the real pleasant surprises of this season. As you mentioned, 4 touchdown receptions this season. Other than Brock Bowers, of course, another player that you mentioned for the Las Vegas Raiders had, arguably the greatest season that any tight end has had, rookie or veteran, was absolutely phenomenal. But still, A.J. Barr finishing second in the NFL among rookie tight ends with 4 touchdown receptions this year. Was not expected to play a lot, but with Noah Fant struggling with injury, Pharaoh Brown earlier in the year as well struggling with injury, A.J. Barr stepping up and playing as well as he did, to me, was one of the highlights. Obviously, he had the touchdown. He had another on a first down, to get a first down, which he ran through 3 different LA Rams defenders, just showing a level of physicality that we have not seen for many of Seattle's tight ends, probably going all the way back to, Mike Tice. So again, it's been a while. And then I would be remiss not mentioning Noah Fant. Obviously, it was his touchdown that won the game for the Seahawks, falling over onto his back. That would be a very difficult ball to hang on to. That was one of the things that Noah Fant has shown over and over his career, is that he is a tough guy. He's not always the most physical guy, doesn't necessarily aggressively take on would-be tacklers the way that A.J. Barr has. But still, you got to give Noah Fant a lot of credit for his toughness on that particular play, the hands, the body control, and the straight line speed that he has always possessed.
Look, we'll see what happens, especially with Ryan Grubb now being fired. It's possible Seattle could bring in a new offensive coordinator that wants a different quarterback. We don't know what's going to happen down the line. But if your argument is that Geno Smith is not going to be worth the cap hit next year, I think if you watch the game yesterday, and I think if you watched a lot of this year, he absolutely is worth that. It's the 12th highest cap hit in the NFL for quarterbacks. It's not like he is one of the top paid QBs. Even next year, that cap hit is still only 12th among quarterbacks. And 4 touchdown passes, first time in his career. You saw that. I want to give a nod to Kenny McIntosh, though. We talked about him some on the postgame show yesterday. I think next year, even with a healthy Ken Walker III and Zach Charbonnet, whoever comes in as the offensive coordinator, you got to find a way to get Kenny McIntosh some snaps. He has earned that. I like how hard he's running the football. The decisiveness is something that you don't see enough from Ken Walker III. It almost feels like Kenny McIntosh is a little bit of a combo of those two guys, because he's not the fastest straight line speed, but he'll shock you with his quickness, making guys miss, and his jump cuts are just as good as Ken Walker III. And he's got a little bit more of that fighter in him that Zach Charbonnet offers. And he's improved as a pass protector. I think there's got to be a place next year for Kenny McIntosh in that rotation. I don't know how you do that, but there are teams out there that get 3 running backs involved in the NFL and do it successfully. Whoever comes in as the offensive coordinator, first, you got to have enough carries to be able to do that, which we know that did not happen this year. But find a way to get that run game going enough that there's the volume that you can take advantage of the talent you have with all 3 of these players, as Kenny McIntosh proved that he very much belongs on the field on offense and on special teams. Looking at the defensive side of the football, there's several guys we could point out here, but Leonard Williams didn't get voted to the Pro Bowl, which it still is just making me, I don't have any hair to pull out, at least on the top of my head. If I did, though, I would be pulling it out if I'm in Leonard Williams' shoes, because I don't know how that man is not voted as one of the top defensive tackles in the NFL this year. And all he did is go out and get 2 sacks in his encore performance and send that last message to these all-pro voters on, the award that really matters. Hey, I didn't make Pro Bowl, but I better be all-pro. And he made a emphatic statement to close out the season.
Yeah, I took the words right out of my mouth there. I really think that Leonard Williams is arguably the MVP of this entire team. I think that for a player that is as veteran as he is, to have this kind of breakout performance here for the Seahawks, to me, it is one of the individuals that really, I think, gives you evidence of why Mike Macdonald is going to be very successful long-term here with the Seahawks. Look, Leonard Williams, of course, was traded for a year ago and was with Pete Carroll, and he had some success a year ago, but he was a different player this season. And the way that Mike Macdonald and his staff, Adam Durday as well, the way that they were able to kind of scheme up ways to allow their individual players to star. So basically the exact opposite of what Ryan Grubb has, struggled with this past season. That to me is one of the most encouraging things, because again, Leonard Williams is a supremely talented player. Well, this is low-hanging fruit we're talking about here. But for him to excel this much, then what's going to happen with the players, the Derek Halls, the Boye Mafis, the guy that you've seen the talent, and they are going to be that much hungrier for the big contract that Leonard Williams has already earned. And so to me, again, that is one of the most exciting things about this is the Seahawks do have the talented, versatile defensive line that Mike Macdonald helped create in Baltimore. And we all know their success that the Ravens are having right now. I believe that that's the future in Seattle as well.
And closing out my Monday musings for the season, you went in the trenches. I've got to give more applause, more praise to a player that didn't play yesterday. When you consider the injuries, and look, when the Rams got all the big chunk plays they did yesterday, a lot of those happened when Reek Woolen and Trey Brown were not on the field because they both got hurt early on. But this was such a disappointing season, in particular for Trey Brown. Every time that he was in the lineup, it felt like opposing quarterbacks and receivers were picking on it. And that continued at the beginning of this game. Not having Josh Jobe out there, for those that are wondering where he fits into future plans, I think he's got to be in the starting lineup next year with Reek Woolen and Devin Witherspoon, the way that it's been the second half of the season. I think those are your 3 starters. You saw how much they missed him even before Trey Brown and then Reek Woolen exited the game with injuries. You saw how much they missed him against backup receivers and the way that the Rams were able to get some of those guys open, get some chunk plays. They had 7 passes of 17 or more yards. 5 of those went 20-plus yards. And then Nehemiah Pritchett has to come in. You saw how much he struggled getting spun up into a pretzel on a double move. Josh Jobe didn't have that happen to him. And Josh Jobe consistently got guys to the ground as a tackler. He was physical. He had 5 pass breaks, an interception, only 1 touchdown given up. To me, Josh Jobe just further elevated his value not being on the field in this finale. And I think he's absolutely got to be penned into the starting lineup next year. Maybe you bring in a draft pick to compete against him, but I think that him, Devin Witherspoon, Reek Woolen, that's your recipe for success in the secondary next year. And this is just another game that really confirmed that with him not playing in the finale. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, we are going to start shifting gears towards potential replacement options for Ryan Grubb. We'll be looking at maybe some college coordinators, NFL coordinators, experienced coordinators, first-time coordinators. We're going to have all kinds of different options that we're going to be looking at on tomorrow's show. Make sure that you are listening in, and thanks for tuning in to this episode. Go Hawks.